It's late September and the breeze is up and the temperature goes down a little bit. I'd like to be out there fishing, but I promised you guys a lure. So we're gonna go back to the lure shop and we're gonna get started on that stick bait. All right, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm Franco. I'm a professional licensed engineer and an absolute nut for lures and fishing. And this channel is all about building lures and fishing with them. I bring to you my techniques for making lures based on engineering and physics, and I share everything I do, including tackle, lure building, and even the tools that I use to make them. Today, we're gonna be working on this stick bait. It's gonna be about a 6-inch stick bait based on this rendering of sardine. I'm not sure what kind of sardine it is. I didn't draw it. I pulled it off the internet. But along with the unique design, I'm going to also use a unique material, something I haven't used before, and I haven't really seen any other lure maker use it. Not that it's that unique. As I've been doing the conversion on my little aluminum rowboat, and I'm converting it into a bass boat, I've been using PVC boards, and recently a PVC trim. Specifically this stuff. It's 3/4 by 1.5 inches, and it has this sort of faux wood grain on it. And it's meant to be used as trim on the outside of homes and the kind of thing. It's not structural, but it's light. And I noticed as I was using the thinner stuff, the stuff that comes in sheets, that it is actually less dense than wood, most woods. So that means it floats. It sort of has a kind of a tight expanded foam sort of texture on the inside. So I thought, you know, this is probably going to be as easy to work with as balsa, but maybe just a little tougher because it's definitely less pliable and has what I think is a greater strength than most any balsa. And it has just about the right size to make a nice stick bait. We got our blank. All right, so I've got the lure blank cut out and I cut out my little block. But not only did I cut the block out, I also cut all the little edges off, because if you take a close look, you can see that the inside is really porous looking, and then it has this sort of shell along the outside. And I cut all that off because I don't want it to affect the density of the wood. So here it is. Here's a little depiction of that little block. I did a bunch of measurements so I could average out the width, length, and height. I multiplied it to get the volume, which is 14.77 cubic centimeters. I weighed it on my little gram scale, it's 5.55, and then I did the division. And the density of this plastic is 0.376 grams per cubic centimeter. And just to put that into perspective, that's about the same as Western cedar. So it's lightweight, it's pretty hard, and it should make a good lure. Let's hope. Next step is to glue this on and cut it out. All right, I'm ready to take this to the bandsaw and cut it out. Let me just go over one more thing, because I know I've given a lot of instruction on how to get density of the material you're using to make your lure. If you're using just a block of wood, what I've suggested you do and what I've done is just to take a small section. But I'm going to modify my instruction and say, instead of taking a sample, just use the entire block. Take a measurement before you cut your lure out, take a measurement, take a weight, and then do the calculation for the volume and then your density, and that'll give you a much closer, much more accurate calculation for that density. All right, enough nerd stuff, let's cut this out. So I've got this cut out, and it's just a matter of getting the contours of the lure body as you look down to it, the plan form of it. So one of the things that really attracted me to this shape is the fact that the wide point is almost to the very center of the length of the lure. And that's what I was looking for. I was going to design one just by hand, and I saw this, and I thought this'll work. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to, on the length of it, as I draw the contour of the lure up here, I'm going to have the wide point right at the wide point of the sort of the height of the lure. I'm going to draw in some guidelines, a center line and some lines close to the edge. I'm going to mark the center line with these calipers. Since this stuff is so soft, I can just scribe it in. Set it on here and just scribe it in, and then I'll just highlight it with a pencil in a minute here. Once I get this on here, then I can run a pencil right in that same line. All right, so there you go. There's my center line. These little edge guidelines, I don't really care where they fall, so the thickness of the pencil is fine. So I'm just going to run them across on all four edges. That'll make it a lot easier for me to eyeball the shape in here. All right. Now, just using some little marks I made on the curve, I can rotate it around, set it more or less in the same configuration on this side, but that's pretty good. That's what I wanted, a really pointy nose. This will probably get narrowed down just a little bit on the center, but that's pretty good. I want the tail to be more or less circular. And you guys have seen my technique for grinding this stuff back. First thing I do is I'll take it back to the bandsaw, cut the general shape along the top with parallel sides. I won't taper it in, and then I'll do all the tapering on the belt sander. And I've got to be careful because this stuff sands real easy. You can see how quickly this stuff sands down. And I'm using the lines that I put on the bottom as guidelines. You can see I've brought this one in, chamfered in pretty good, and I've got to bring this one in as well. I'm going to take this all the way down and make sure I don't have any of this texture, and I'll make sure that I get it down as far here as I do here, and vice versa. And then I've got to get all the humps and weird flat spots out, and hopefully get this rounded off pretty nicely. So that means taking a lot off here. So it's just a matter of patience, sighting down it every now and then. Luckily, this is like 100 grit that's been worn down to probably 150 grit, so it doesn't go too fast. Good symmetry is what you want. So let's just keep working. All right, I'm pretty happy with the shape. You might have noticed that there's a change when I go out in the shop, that there's a change in picture quality and sound. Well, that's because I'm using my GoPro because it's so dusty. I just want to be able to just rinse this thing off. I've got the shape right where I want it for being able to do the rest by hand. I'll be able to take sanding blocks and just get this smoothed out, eyeball it, and slowly get it shaped in the way I want it. But just for comparison's sake, you can see that the shape is pretty much what I intended. One of the challenges of doing a lure in a material that has this low a density is getting enough weight in it to get it to do what you want it to do. I'm leaving the body with some heft, so you need to have enough room for putting some lead in it, but at the same time, the more volume the body has, the more lead you have to add to it. So it's kind of like a weird balance that you have to strike. Okay, so I'm getting pretty close, but while I give my hands a little bit of a break, let's go over to the dry erase board and let's talk about one more design element. So as I consider how I'm going to finish this lure, in other words, weight, balance, and all the hardware, I need to really consider how I want it to behave. So what I want this lure to do is I want it to slowly rise through the water column. I want it to have a very slow rise, so it's almost gonna be neutral. So when I twitch it, I want it to dive and sort of glide off to one side and then slowly rise to the surface again and then twitch below the surface again. But understanding what I want it to do really is going to influence where I put all my hardware and how I shape the head a little bit. So I really don't feel very comfortable using screw-in eyes. I'm going to need a full length, one piece, a wire harness on the inside. Since I know I need the head to dive down when I twitch on it, I'm going to place the tie-on eye just above the center line of the lure. I'll also leave a flat spot right here, and I've already got it sort of started on this lure. I need to have this lure sort of balanced so it sits nice and neutral, or level with the water. So that means being able to keep most of the weight forward, since most of the buoyancy is forward, and there's going to be a hook hanging way back here, which gives you a lot of lever arm. I'm going to place the belly hook kind of close up to the head. Not so close that it'll tangle with the line, but as close as I can place it there. And then I've got to have an internal wire harness. Now most folks will cut in from the belly and cut a slot. And I don't really like doing that, and I'll tell you why. I prefer to cut a slot in the top and then drill a hole here so that what I end up with is this part of the bend sealed in epoxy, where if you pull on it, it can't spread this. It also gives me a lot of room for placing lead weight, right? Well, that's my plan. Hopefully I'll be able to execute it with this stuff. We'll see how it drills. I haven't done that, and we'll see how well I can carve it. All right, so I've got the sanding pretty much how I want it. You can see the little flat spot up here, I hope. Kind of see it, that it's flat right there. And I've got the eyes sort of sketched in on this side and then marked on this side. And I'll just give it its eye socket. And I like going backwards with these bits so I don't tear a big chunk out. And it still kind of presses a nice eye socket in there without doing any damage. And I'll do the same thing over here. And that looks pretty good. It's pretty much symmetric. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Now it's just a matter of sketching in what I want carved. So, and I'll just sketch this out. And I can always erase what I don't like. And I kind of like the way that looks. And I'll carry it below, bring it around. So I think that's going to look pretty good. Maybe I'll make this top part just a little bigger. Yeah, I like that. I think that's going to look pretty good. Well, I've started the carving. I have to say it carves, but not very cleanly. It actually wants to chip and stuff, so I'll do my best. I'll kind of get it fared in as best I can, and then cover it all with some foil. The foil will sort of sink into these carvings really nicely, and we'll get a nice effect in the end. I don't think it's really going to be worth doing much more than this as far as detail. And you can see it's pretty good. It's just difficult to get it smooth because it's sort of brittle and doesn't behave very well. So I'm going to continue to sort of buff it off with some really fine steel wool. And then from here, we got to cut in the slot for the wire harness. All right, so before I get too far along, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. I really need to do a weigh-in now. I've got this thing shaped pretty much where I want it. Yeah, I'm going to be removing a little material when I saw cut this, but it'll be replaced with actually a slightly heavy material in the resin. And so this is where, you know, finely calculated science turns into a little bit of witchcraft. Actually, just through so many lures that I've made, and just so many tests and so much data that I've actually gathered up. Yes, I've done that. I kind of know how much I can play with the weight. I need to weigh the body now that it's shaped. And I get 11.13 grams. So the next step is super simple. Don't have to get too complicated. I'm going to take the density that I calculated for my little block, which was 0.37, and I'm going to divide that into my weight. And I get 30.08. So I'm going to call it 30.1. That's 30.1 grams. That's actually the volume of this lure body. And so since I can directly transfer that to grams of water displaced, don't worry what that means if you don't know. That just means that I can leave that on there, and I need to have enough weight added to this scale at 11.13 that where it actually reaches the 30.1, and that'll be the exact weight that this lure has to be perfectly neutral. And the idea here is to add all the hardware weight that I know is going to have to be in the lure, and I'm going to include the 2 split rings and the internal wire harness that I'm going to use in it. And I'm at 15.67. Remember, we're trying to get to 30.1, and so I'm going to add a couple of lead balls here. These are all just round split shots, and those 2 get us to 24.48. I've got a piece of a bullet weight that is a little too heavy, so it's about a gram too heavy, but I can modify it. And so my idea is here, I'm just going to cut another little chunk out of it and try to get it down to where I need it. And there you go, 30.3, those 2/10, I'm happy with that. So that really is the simplest way to use those density numbers. So now I have everything I'm going to put in the lure, and I'll put it all in a little container so I don't lose it. So before I cut the slot, I want to show you a little bit of the complication of making this kind of harness. You can see I put a little hook in there to anchor in the resin, and then the tie-on eye will drop in right there and stick out a little bit. And it also has a long section that drops down into the hole that's going to be here for the belly eye, and it'll be encased in resin as well. Now I'm going to start cutting this line right here, and this I still have remnants of my center line, so I can kind of follow that. All right, that's a pretty good slot. I've got it cut back pretty well. Now I need to drill the hole for this to drop into. And now it's just a matter of fitting and adjusting and grinding and adjusting some more. But that's in place. That's in place. Now I just need to put in all the resin and fill that hole up completely. And that'll lock all this together and keep it from getting stretched out or yanked out. All right, now for my least favorite part of this whole thing, and that's having to drill big gaping holes for this lead. I hate having to do this. And the first lead ball. And then the last and absolutely not least, actually the last and the biggest, fits right in there. So now my beautiful lure is a Frankenstein lure, and now I've got to do some filling to get this sandable. All right, so this is definitely my least favorite part. I hate having to drill holes in something I already shaped and sanded really smoothly. So now I've got it back sanded smoothly, and I recovered some of the carved lines that I had in there. And now we're about ready to go ahead and mix the resin and get this thing filled. And I'll show you a little trick on how to do it really easily. But before I go to that, I just want to remind everybody that every thumbs up I get really helps me out. It helps YouTube recognize the channel as something that people want to watch. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't, subscribe. Certainly subscribe. It's free. All right, so the first thing you need to do, or the first thing I like to do, is to make sure that that little hole at the bottom doesn't weep the resin out. So what I've done is I've cut a little disc of aluminum foil. This is the self-adhering stuff, and I cut a little slot in it, and I don't want to have the hole sealed just yet because I want to be able to put some of the resin from the bottom, seal it, and then finish it off from the top. This is 1 hour resin, so I don't have to hurry too much, and I prefer that. I hate having resin just set off on me before I'm ready. So I'm gonna take this Ziploc bag, and then I'm gonna squeeze out the amount I think I need, and I think I need a pretty good amount actually. So I don't want to get too little in there. Okay. Now at the temperature of the room here, this should take about an hour to actually fully set up. But it'll give me about 10 minutes of working time, which should be enough. And what I do is I just take the two parts and I kind of knead them in here. Of course, the Ziploc is closed. And then as I knead it, it spreads all over the place, and I can just squeegee it back down into the bottom and then do it again. All I do now is cut very little off the very tip of this corner. Just a tiny bit. I'll get all the resin down to the bottom. I'm going to start at the very bottom here and squeeze in. And this way I can kind of pressurize my application here. And then I'll seal this. I can start again on the top. That does a pretty good job. If it comes up a little short, I can fill it in with a little UV resin, and it'll look perfect. All right, so it's done. If you do this right, you don't get your hands dirty like I did. I grabbed the wrong end of that little plastic bag. Anyway, this should set up in a couple hours, and then I'll be able to sand it down and get it ready for the next step, which is putting foil on it. But that'll be for the next video. So thank you very much for watching. And keep the questions and comments coming. I really enjoy them. I try to get to everyone. Oh, and let me know what you think of posting on Sundays. I'll see you on the next video.